Hello everyone, my name is Jason Hill, and as you can see, the title of my research project is Building Relationships with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation and Academia, Phase 1 Assessment of Internal and External Capacity. For the remainder of this presentation, you'll hear me refer to the Department of Conservation as DCR. So what does that mean? Building relationships between DCR and academia, and why should we be interested in exploring partnerships between this governmental organization and institutions of higher learning? Well, there are a lot of reasons why we should be interested in collaborative efforts across different sectors, but the purpose of this study was relatively specific, and that's because DCR is currently facing some serious challenges with planning for park management and operations. Planning efforts for the agency commonly identify a lack of information on natural resources, cultural resources, visitor behavior, demographics, preferences, and so on. Typically, this lack of information or data gaps are identified in resource management plans, RMPs, and recommendations are made to gather information to inform and refine future planning efforts. Now the problem is that, not surprisingly, the agency lacks the necessary resources to fill these identified data gaps. And this challenge is further complicated by the fact that there are a total of 80 resource management plans that were identified in a 2009 statewide survey performed by the agency. These resource management plans account for over 450,000 acres of land throughout the state. The state is by far the largest landowner in the Commonwealth. Now, following the formation of the Stewardship Council in 2004, the Stewardship Council is essentially the agency's advisory board. There have been 12 RMPs adopted by the council, 6 RMPs currently in progress, and 62 RMPs waiting their turn in line. So again, that's 12 RMPs adopted over a span of almost 10 years. Obviously, developing these foundational documents is a long, painstaking process that often takes planners months, if not more than a year, to complete just one. Now, there are over 110 colleges and universities in Massachusetts, and many offer courses, certificate programs, graduate degrees in subject areas relevant to park planning, operations management, marketing, anthropology, archaeology, exercise science, public health, sociology, the list goes on. But the point is that very few institutions have established relationships with DCR, and fewer still have an ongoing presence on state park lands. We know that the state park system has a lot to offer students and faculty for field trips, laboratory exercises, research, but they're rarely used for these purposes. We think that a formal-wide system and program to recruit colleges and universities to conduct classes and research on DCR properties has the potential to do two things, and that's enhance education in the Commonwealth and generate information beneficial to the improved management of the Commonwealth's park system. Now, this is a very big project, for lack of a better word, and it's a real project. I was asked by senior staff at DCR to develop an investigation of these issues using the structure of the Supply Policy Research course. So we all sat down in January to develop an approach, and it quickly became apparent that the size and scope of this project required us to break it into two phases. The overarching goal purpose of this study is to perform an assessment of the internal capacity, DCR, and external capacity, academic institutions throughout the Commonwealth, to investigate the potential for supporting DCR's management goals, or more specifically, filling these data gaps identified in RMPs through the development of strategic partnerships. So the precise parameters of this report, Phase 1, were structured through essentially 4 research questions, 5 if you include the goal of offering some preliminary recommendations. Number 1 was to sort of look at what current relationships exist between DCR and academia in the Commonwealth. Number 2, what is the internal capacity, or we might think of this as the deficiencies or needs that exist within the agency that could benefit from collaboration with academia. What are the information gaps and express needs of DCR planners? What current capacity exists in academia, external capacity, to support DCR's management goals? What are the programs, degrees offered at institutions that might be relevant to the kind of work performed at DCR? And then based on the this capacity? What is the range in types of feasible and appropriate relationships that could be promoted between DCR and academia? And then fifthly, like I said, would be to offer some preliminary recommendations from our findings. So again, these are the primary research questions representing phase 1, and secondary research questions will be addressed in phase 2 that primarily, I won't get into the details, but involve proposing an appropriate governance structure for carrying out an improved college and university recruitment program. The methods used in this study, I won't go into the details. We're pressed on time here, but it was primarily survey research was the means of data collection. There were different approaches, slightly different approaches taken to identify internal and external capacity. Internal capacity was determined through a series of one-on-one interviews and focus groups with various DCR staff members. There was 14 in total, 8 of which were focus groups. External capacity was data was collected through correspondence with universities via email, and then further correspondence typically via telephone. In addition, there was a long assessment of documents filed at headquarters and other offices at DCR. Most of these documents involve permits or other documents that support and can help us identify what interactions currently exist. There was also university and college websites were used to confirm academic programs to determine other potential avenues of collaboration. GIS staff at DCR was used to produce maps and look at proximity of institutions of higher learning in DCR properties. But that's the gist of it. Before we go into our findings, a quick note about some legislative considerations. The the Department of Conservation and Recreation is separated into 4 distinct divisions. The mission of DCR is far-reaching in comparison to majority of state agencies, and that's important to understand. And chief among its focuses is to establish first-rate management systems and practices, without which they wouldn't be able to accomplish their overarching mission to protect, promote, and enhance our commonwealth of natural, cultural, and recreational resources. To help meet these demands internally, the agency is further guided by its statutory responsibilities to prepare management plans. And so the point here is that these resource management plans drive the work of the agency, and therefore efforts must be taken to expedite their development. If the agency has taken nearly 10 years to complete 12 RMPs, I think we can safely assume that we have a long way to go and must take advantage of opportunities for partnerships that could hurry up the process. Findings. Past and current relationships. There have been and continue to be a variety of relationships between DCR and academia. Overall, it's not possible, nor is it really necessary to capture every one of these interactions. It is critical, however, for DCR to understand the types of collaborative efforts that have been successful in order for the agency to capitalize on potential beneficial relationships and avoid or reassess those that have not been successful. The extent of internships, projects, and classes on state park lands is very limited, we found, relative to the size and scope of the agency. There are exceptions. The Office of Cultural Resources and the Division of Water Supply and Protection do have some fairly robust internship programs, but they are really rather alone in this. Of all these types of relationships found in the study, those with UMass Amherst are by far the most abundant. Although DCR's relations with UMass Amherst has spanned several decades, there really still is no formal program in place for maintaining and sustaining these interactions. Interviewees were asked if they were interested in soliciting the work of interns. 3 respondents expressed concern about being able to secure high-quality candidates, but overwhelmingly the response was positive. The difficulty, of course, is that they have to seek interns on their own initiatives, and that becomes difficult to do with such big workloads that already exist. And number 2, and probably most importantly, there is no funding available for interns at DCR, so that is a major deterrent. Research-based collaboration. DCR approves research on state lands through two separate channels. General research permits issued by permitting staff at headquarters, and then research permits issued by the Water Supply and Protection offices, sort of a separate entity. All academic research projects approved by headquarters in the past 2 years were identified in the study. There were a total of 13. Nearly all of the permitted research projects identified are in the natural resource sciences. There are a few very notable exceptions, but for the most part, that is the case. A reoccurring theme for all these research projects was that very few of them presented their findings to DCR, less than 10%. Research-based collaboration with the Water Supply and Protection appears to be more robust than other divisions. This could be for a number of reasons, but that I won't get into in this report and this presentation. But there were a total of 28 that we uncovered, and there are more. Other types of interactions. This study found a total of 21 interdepartmental service agreements and a total of 32 special use permits issued to institutions of higher learning. In many instances, although these interactions are not necessarily desirable in terms of R&P development, they do represent possibly the building blocks for partnerships designed to enhance education and meet the needs of the agency, but also serve as an opportunity for fundraising and outreach and visitor use surveying. So they are still important to consider. Internal capacity. Internal capacity for this study was defined as DCR's ability to engage and sustain continuous involvement of academic institutions for the purpose of improved management of the park system. Internal capacity involved a needs assessment of the common data gaps and information barriers expressed by staff members, and those needs were broken down into 4 categories: visitation behavior, natural resources, historical and cultural resources, and climate change. Accurately measuring visitation, park visitation has been and continues to be the most difficult task by DCR, for DCR. Defining visitation involves calculating the number of visitors, determining the types of activities, and so planning staff uses what tools they have to collect and incorporate this data into management plans, but there's no formal procedure in place. And we found that most of the time agency either lacks the necessary resources to make these assessments, or does not have the expertise required to make them, or the physical characteristics of park lands present very difficult challenges for them to make these assessments. So clearly DCR could benefit greatly from academic studies on park visitation behavior. This might consist of programs, classes, and research in the social sciences or other disciplines more specifically related to park operations and management, exercise and health sciences, and other more social aspects of the parks. I won't bore you with the detail of what we found for natural resources and historical and cultural resources. The important thing to know is that information is highly variable depending on the location and specialty groups visiting certain parks. These information gaps are usually filled using county data and GIS systems, but this approach we found really provides an educated guess at best. Ideally, the agency would use dedicated surveys and assessments for each property to make these determinations, but they just don't have the resources to do so. It's expensive, and the point is that there are universities and colleges out there doing this work, and so involvement could span a wide range of programs and classes related to natural resource sciences. Climate change consideration is very interesting because this is really something that the Stewardship Council has initiated and encouraged the agency to incorporate these considerations in their resource management planning process. The agency has made efforts to account for these considerations and recently completed RMPs, but frequently lacks the resources and knowledge base to make accurate assessments. DCR staff members are not experts in climate science and policy, nor should they be when the experts in these fields surround them at institutions of higher learning. Academic involvement could partnerships could be with climatologists, environmental planning departments, coastal management programs, public policy departments, other disciplines that conduct classes and